Hi, welcome to Ketogenic Healthcare. This is a new channel, and as the first video for this channel, as an introduction, I would like to discuss about the history of the ketogenic diet and how this came to be one of the most controversial diets of this century. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to switch to one right now. The history of the ketogenic diet. It all started with one word, and that word is epilepsy. Now you see, the oldest documented cases of epilepsy date from around 2000 BC and were found written on a Babylonian tablet that is currently located in the British Museum. This tablet is part of a 40 tablets medical textbook written by the Babylonians. They considered epilepsy to be supernatural and they called it the sacred disease. In their perception, epilepsy seizures were evil, god, or demonic possessions, and they treated it as a spiritual matter. 1500 years after this, around 500 BC, a treatise written by the father of medicine, the Greek Hippocrates, describes the sacred disease in one of the chapters. Now, being a skeptic, Hippocrates came with a revolutionary idea that epilepsy was not sacred, but a disorder of the brain. He refused to believe that the human body could be invaded by a god or demon, so he recommended physical treatment and also stated that if the disease became chronic, it couldn't be treated anymore. As a matter of fact, the word epilepsy is derived from the Greek word epilepsia, which means to take hold of or to seize. In the modern medicine, as a tribute to the great Hippocrates, medical doctors still call it an epileptic seizure. Although the Hippocratic corpus dates 500 BC, it was forgotten for more than 2000 years because of supernatural views that dominated until well after the 19th century. Throughout history, people who suffered from epilepsy were viewed with great misunderstanding, suspicion, and often with fear. They were treated as outcasts, punished and stigmatized, but there were exceptions to the rule, as epilepsy affected great historical figures like Julius Caesar, Tsar Peter the Great of Russia, even Lord Byron had epilepsy, the writer Fyodor Dostoevsky, and even Pope Pius IX. To our shame as a society, even to this day, people with epilepsy are being discriminated and treated differently than other people. Now, as a fun trivia fact, what we know today as Valentine's Day, and we consider to be Lovers' Day, started as the day when Christians celebrate Saint Valentine, which was the patron and protector of the people with epilepsy. The day was a reason for pilgrimage in specific built sites in Italy, France, Belgium, and Germany. Saint Valentine's was even a bishop in Terni, Italy. So that's about it with the old time, the old period, and we are going to move to the 19th century. Now, in the 19th century, as neurology emerged as a new medical discipline, apart from psychiatry, the concept of epilepsy as a brain disorder became more widely accepted around the world. Studies regarding epilepsy helped developing a lot of the modern neurological treatments and medical devices. For example, the world's first effective anti-epileptic drug, potassium bromide, was introduced in 1857 by Sir Charles Lowcock and was used throughout Europe and North America until the second part of the last century actually. Now, next, the modern understanding of the derangement of function seen in epilepsy was founded with the proposal of Huggins-Jackson, a neurologist from London in the year 1873. Now, this is where it starts to be very interesting, because this is a very big step for the development of the ketogenic diet. Mr. Huggins-Jackson proposed that the seizures were the result of sudden brief electrochemical discharges of energy in the brain, and the character of the seizures depend on the location and function of the seat of the discharges. This means that a neurologist can check the effects of an epileptic seizure and tell precisely in which part of the brain the discharge occurred. Now, very important, this study was the precursor for the discovery of the human electroencephalograph, EEG brainwaves, by Dr. Hans Berger from Germany in the 1920s. This was just the beginning of the modern neurology, which continued with the development of sophisticated neuroimaging machines like the computer tomography scanning, CT, or the magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, as we know them today. Now, after this, there was a very big event in the year 1911. Because potassium bromide was known to slow down the brain functions of the patients, there were two doctors that were operating in France. And that's Dr. Guillaume Guelpa and Dr. Auguste Marie. And their book, I'll try to say it in a French accent, La lutte contre l'épilepsie par la désintoxication et par la rééducation alimentaire. Okay, I have a typo there with the re-education. Sorry about that. In English, it would translate the fight against epilepsy by detox and dietary re-education. Now, because potassium bromide was slowing patients' mental capabilities, Dr. Guelpa and Marie decided to conduct a study on 20 epilepsy patients and recorded the results in their book. You need to understand that before this study, potassium bromide was accepted as worldwide medicine anti-epileptic drug. Okay, everybody was using that. Okay, so let's get back to the patients. The doctors recorded the results in their book, and the patients followed the low-calorie vegetarian food plan that was combined with fasting, actually. Although most of the patients couldn't adhere to the dietary restriction, 2 of the patients showed significant improvements. The diet was found to improve the patient's mental abilities compared with the effect of taking potassium bromide. Okay, this is a big discovery for them. Meanwhile, in United States, pretty much the same year, an American proponent for physical culture named Bernard McFadden popularized the use of fasting to restore health. His disciple, the osteopathic physician Hugh Conklin from Battle Creek, Michigan, began to treat his patients by recommending them fasting. Now, here's what's very interesting about Mr. Conklin. He suggested that the epileptic seizures were caused by the discharge into the bloodstream of a toxin secreted by the aggregated lymphoid nodules, also called Pierce patches or PP. That happens in the small intestine. He recommended a water fast lasting between 18 and 25 days to completely eliminate the toxin from the body. He also claimed that his water diet had a 90% cure rate in children and around 50% in adults. Later analysis showed that 20% of his patients achieved freedom from seizures and around 50% had significant improvement. So that's very, very good results. Okay, soon after, the fasting therapy was adopted as the mainstream therapy for epilepsy, and in 1916, a doctor named McMurray sends a letter to the New York Medical Journal in which he claims to have treated epilepsy patients with a water fast followed by a starch and sugar-free diet. After this letter, in 1921, looking firsthand at Conklin's results, the endocrinologist Henry Raoul Galen reported his experiences to American Medical Association convention, in which he achieved similar results despite only having studied the patients for a short time. Further studies into the 1920s showed that the seizures returned after the end of the fast. Okay, so this was not permanent. It's very important to know. Now let's get back at Mr. Conklin. And here's the actual beginning of the ketogenic diet. A wealthy New York corporate lawyer called Charles Howland happened to be the parent of one of Conklin's successful patients, so he gave his brother John $5,000 to study the ketosis of starvation. Okay, you need to understand that back in the 20s, $5,000 was a very big amount of money. John Howland, a professor of pediatrics at Johns Hopkins Hospital, used the money to fund research undertaken by neurologist Stanley Cobb and his assistant William G. Lennox, both from Harvard Medical School. Now, Lennox observed that the seizures began to subside after 2-3 days of fasting, which led him to conclude that the result came from a change in metabolism, more specifically a change in the body's fuel. Lennox suggested that the body began fueling itself on fat instead of glucose, a connection that was crucial in the development of the ketogenic diet. Now in 1921, the endocrinologist Rollin Woodyard reviewed the research on diet and diabetes, and he noticed that 3 water-soluble compounds, beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and acetone, what we call today ketone bodies, were produced in the liver in otherwise healthy people when they were starved or they consumed a very low carbohydrate and high fat diet. Now the Mayo Clinic. Dr. Russell Wilder from the renowned Mayo Clinic built on this research and came up with a new idea. He realized that through fasting, although fasting was very effective, it wasn't sustainable on long term. He proposed that the body could produce the same ketone bodies in the blood that it produced during fasting, except with the patient eating regularly. This prolonged state became what Dr. Wilder termed as ketogenic diet, a diet that produced a high level of ketone bodies in the blood, also known ketonemia, through an excess of fat and lack of carbohydrates. Following Wilder's study, his colleague from Mayo Clinic, pediatrician Minnie Peterman, later formulated the classic diet with the ratio that we even know today. 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight in children, 10-15 grams of carbohydrate per day, and the remaining calories from fat. Aside from some minor alterations to the diet, this is the same diet that is practiced today. Dr. Peterman also noticed the ketogenic diet's positive effect on the brain's performance, noting that people adhering to the ketogenic diet displayed a marked change in character concomitant with the ketosis, a decrease in irritability, and an increased interest and alertness. So it's not just rumors, okay? It was medically proven that ketogenic diet and lifestyle increases alertness in the brain, interest, decreases irritability, so it's also good when we're dealing with depression. So, at the same time, he also noted some negative short-term effects: nausea and vomiting due to excess ketosis, what we know today as ketogenic flu symptoms. And we're going to talk about the ketogenic flu symptoms in a different video. The difference today between medical ketogenic diet and nutritional ketogenic diet is that the nutritional one allows up to 30-35 grams of carbohydrates per day, but it will lower the results. It's easier to respect, but also don't expect to have the same results that you have otherwise with medical ketogenic diet. Now, the ketogenic diet became so famous and successful that it became a serious competitor to the pharmaceutical industry producing anti-epileptic drugs. Action was taken, and in the following decades, modern medicine attempted and succeeded even in making the ketogenic diet look like an archaic method, as opposed to modern anti-epileptic drugs that control seizures without forcing patients to respect the dietary plan. Okay, so yeah, this is one of the biggest problems that we have in the 21st century. Okay, we want everything to be easy. We don't care if it's about health or not. We just want it to be easy. Okay, so basically in the 60s and 70s, the parents would rather fill up their children with pills, with anti-epileptic drugs, instead of making an effort to prepare a ketogenic meal, because it was easier for them. So, for decades, the anti-epileptic drugs ruled the field, and there were actual no developments on the subject of the ketogenic diet. And this was about to change drastically in the year 1994 because of an episode of the NBC show Dateline, which followed the case of a boy called Charlie Abrahams. Now, Charlie had been through endless seizures for the first 2 years of his life, and his parents tried everything from faith to anti-epileptic drugs, homeopathic medicine, and at one point even brain surgery, but nothing worked. While researching treatments for epilepsy, Charlie's father, Jim Abrahams, discovered the ketogenic diet. Now, he took Charlie to the Johns Hopkins Hospital, where he began the diet and saw immediate results. Now, not only was Charlie able to control his seizures, but he also made significant cognitive development that was previously thought unlikely by his doctors. So the doctor never gave him a chance. Now, Charlie's father began to ask himself why nobody told them sooner about this diet and its benefits, most likely not knowing that the pharmaceutical industry was the culprit. Realizing that other families could be going through the same struggle, he founded the Charlie Foundation. He began producing resources for other families who were in the fight against epilepsy. The Abrahams had no idea how important their work would become. The fact that they managed to bring notoriety back to the ketogenic diet and its efficacy for treating epilepsy has reinvigorated interest in the diet. Following this event, Jim Abrahams produced a TV movie titled First Do Not Harm, starring Meryl Streep, in which a young boy's interactable epilepsy is successfully treated by the ketogenic diet. Okay, now you need to understand that all these facts about the ketogenic diet's origins are founded in the pursuit of scientific truth. It's not meant to make profit, but to help and heal. And in the last, let's say, half of the last century, both food and pharmaceutical industry proved to have interest just in profit and not in the well-being of the consumer. So even to this day, it's very easy to understand why so many entities are trying to bring down credibility into the ketogenic diet. It's easy to understand why. It affects business. We live in a capitalistic world and it affects profits. Okay? But before denying it altogether, try it first. Okay? So I hope this would put the ketogenic diet into a different light now that you know it's over 4,000 years old. And I hope you liked my introduction, and I hope to see you again in my other videos.